And interestingly, in the last 2 decades, biblical scholars have changed their opinions on the Ezekiel and Isaiah passages that he ascends to heaven. And this was the king of Tyre. It wasn't Satan. I think the imagery is pretty clear.
Yeah. This is Ask Dr. E, where Dr. Michael Easley answers your biblical or theological questions in 10 minutes or less. Today's question comes from Kim. She writes, based on Revelation 12:9, when was Satan cast out of heaven? Could you give me scriptures for your reasoning? Thank you, Kim. Thanks so much.
We're keeping a lot of Satan questions lately.
Well, again, my theory that this is Bible Study Fellowship people who all just studied Revelation for the last year. My theory.
Let's talk about this book for just a second, for a
The
hot
Bible.
minute. The Bible. But I often tell people you need to own a single volume theology handbook.
Yeah.
I know at BSF you're not really allowed to use resources, are you?
No, just the Bible.
But you can do this afterwards.
Yeah.
The reason I like Paul Enns' work is even though it's a big book, the chapters are 2 to 3 pages long. It's very accessible. We did our marriage mentor group. You and Tyler
I have that book. I also have Grudem's, which I like better than Enns, but
Really?
You would say the opposite. But
Really?
you know, Grudem is a little grab bag when it comes to theology. So I like that.
Yeah.
I like that he's kind of murky on his. But I think both of them do a good job of saying these are kind of the 3 or 5 or whatever major interpretations, and then they'll give their leanings.
Well, and the benefit of that's exactly what I was going to say. The benefit of Enns, like even in replacement theology, which we talked about, is he'll put side by side, why the Arminians believe this, why so forth, and so it's just helpful in a way. And so with a question like this, and BSF has in a way demonstrated you can't solve this simply by looking at the Bible.
That's right.
You've got to do some theology.
Yeah.
So that's all I was going to bring up. But it's a great tool. I prefer the physical book for a lot of reasons. But anyway, let's talk about some of the judgments. And I took some of these from Enns' book. Satan falls from his original exalted position. And I don't know if y'all studied in Ezekiel and Isaiah, the passages, the I will passages,
I don't think so.
and the I'll ascend to heaven, I'll be like the Most High, the King of Tyre, the King, and so forth. And so we have to ask the question, is she asking about the fall only in the end times or in the very beginning?
Right. I think end times just because she references Revelation 12, 9, 12.
Yep. And we'll get there. Okay, his ultimate defeat is pronounced in Eden. He's rendered powerless at the cross, and a couple of verses there, Hebrews 2:14 would be a good one. He'll be cast out of heaven during the tribulation, and that's in Revelation 12:13. Okay. So during that tribulation period, he's tossed out of heaven, and we talked about that in another episode. He's bound for 1,000 years, and we just addressed that in a former question.
Yep.
And then he'll finally be cast into the lake of fire in chapter 20, verses 7 to 10. He's defeated and sent to the lake of fire for all eternity. So that's sort of the broad picture. So what would you push back or ask for more clarity? What am I missing with her?
No, I'm just looking at her reference and question. So Revelation 12 is 7, and there was a war in heaven. Michael and his angels are waging war with the dragon, because prior to that, there's been a dragon who's going after the woman who gives birth to a male child. There's so much interpretation that's happening here, kind of that maybe changes the way you look at verses 7 through 9. But the dragon and his angels wage war. They were not strong enough, and there was no longer a place found for them in heaven. So and then the great dragon was thrown down, the serpent of old, who was called Devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world, and he was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. So, I mean, even here, Dad, is this... I just don't remember where we are in Revelation 12. When is this?
And one of the questions is chronological or not. And,
right.
And a lot of.
Yes.
I think it is.
Okay.
I don't. I mean, some people take it out. I follow in the Walford camp because everything else has been, an orderly approach.
Yeah.
I don't think it ends interpretational issues, but I think in Genesis 37, this is referred to as the War of Ages.
Okay.
And so, I from an end time scheme, I guess I'm not overworking it, or I should be overworking it more. But to me, I think it's pretty clear that he's out during the 1,000 years, and then of course he'll be loosed again to deceive the nations. We talked about that in an earlier episode. Unless I'm missing something.
I don't think so.
Okay. So we're done with that question. 10 minutes or less, right? 10 minutes or less. But,
So if she's asking, I'm going to assume that she's thinking that this is Genesis, basically. This Revelation 12:9 is referring to Genesis. And so she wants to know when Satan was cast out of heaven. I don't know.
Again, old economy, we don't have a time frame in the beginning where Satan and his minions.
And how long did they exist? Did God create them?
Well,
there's so many.
Old Earth, young Earth.
So many questions from Genesis.
Old Earth, young Earth. Some people think it was in Genesis 1 and 2, the gap. There's a lot of, we just don't know. We do know from those two passages. And interestingly, in the last 2 decades, biblical scholars have changed their opinions on the Ezekiel and Isaiah passages that he ascends to heaven. And this was the king of Tyre. It wasn't Satan. I think the imagery is pretty clear.
Yeah.
And I think it illustrates what Satan was like. And then, of course, he's obviously real. He tempts Jesus in the wilderness. He's still at play. Michael is mentioned in Jude. He's mentioned here, the archangel. That's one of the cryptic passages. He could not pronounce a railing judgment against Satan. I mean, there's a lot about Satan we don't know. I think we know enough to be aware of him and be careful that we're not tempted. But I think the schema is during that, back to the pre-millennial, amillennial, post-millennial view. You got to decide which one you are there. But when Christ reigns for that 1,000 years, he's bound. Then he's loosed again for a period at the end. And we won't talk about the options of how long he's loosed. But it says to deceive the nations who will then assemble at Harmageddo. And then that'll be the end of the end. So, and I hope I'm not around. That's why I'm pre-mill, pre-trib.
Someone was asking me the other day what I thought, and I was like, well, I just hope it's pre-mill, pre-trib. That's going to be the best thing for us. I don't know if that's true. We shall see. And
eternity is a very long time. So be sure you know who Jesus Christ is and you put your faith and trust in him and him alone, because this is not something you want to gamble on. You want to know that you know that you know.
I know what I was going to say. I think it's interesting if Job was the first book written, and I guess the oldest book written, scholars have confirmed based on whatever, all this stuff better than I do. But I mean, that begins with Satan approaching the throne, approaching God.
Where have you come from? Walking around on the earth.
So it's like,
my domain, buddy.
Like, that's the first book that was ever recorded. And then Noah writes Genesis, I
had a professor at seminary that believed that the angelic hosts, so Christ is the creator. Not God the Father. Don't parse this too tightly. But Colossians, Christ was in the beginning. I think Christ is the one who makes Adam out of dirt. And so the angelic realm, Geisler believed that the angelic realm was dispensed at Christ's bidding to put the stars in the heavens, sustain the orbits, which was pretty interesting. That's why there were myriads and myriads, because even though Christ is the ultimate creator of fiat, he speaks, he sent the angels to dispatch these things. Why else would you have angelic beings?
Right. Interesting.
And so it was, again, angelology is a whole nother fascinating study. But it's interesting and I love it, but I come back to, how is this helping our faithfulness here and now? How am I living? It's intriguing stuff, and I'm a nerd like a lot of people when it comes to this stuff. But at some point, you say, I'm not sure. I don't know. This is what I do know.
What do I need to know to live faithfully today? And where God
what
has
I know
placed
based
me.
on the text. Always rely on the text. And so if it's it gets confusing with the dragon and the woman and so forth. But go where it's clear. It's clear that there's a 1,000-year period, literal or not. I think literal. That Satan's bound, then he's freed, and then you have this gathering. Or you can say Revelation 8 and following is allegory, which some people do. I think you're wrong.
Either way, God wins.
That's a fact.
The story ends the same. The story ends he won and keeps winning. I don't know. All right. If you've got a question for Dr. E, call us, text us, email us. The info is in your show notes.